So, welcome to another action-packed episode of Hadron Converters Space. Hopefully I can live up to the razzmatazz of the intro, but I'm sure that things will be able to run a little bit more smoothly than it was with the live streaming now that I can do a little bit of creative editing and most especially to mix the sound in a bit better. And so what we have playing behind me now is a bit of music by Sandy Crow from Scotland, and we'll talk about him a bit more in a few minutes. And the main feature of the show tonight will be Sci-Fi Spaceships. And recently, 2 weeks ago I think it was, someone posted on the Hawkwind fan site about what is your ideal best sci-fi spaceship, and that caused quite a response. It was buzzing around for quite a while there, because everyone's got their idea about what the best sci-fi spaceship is, and as usual I find it hard to choose because I've got so many favourites. I think there's some real good ones out there. So I thought I'd try to put together a bit of a buyer's guide to the best spaceships around there, and maybe make some suggestions. So if you're around there kicking a few tyres and thinking about what you're going to use to go off to the nearby stars, we can have a look at a few of the models that are available out there and see what you think. So we'll have a little bit of a pause and have a listen to Sandy's tune. And so here it is, another Chewy Cheese Tuesday by Sandy Crow. So a brief bit of bio information about Sandy. He tells me he's been playing the guitar since he was about 18, and he'd seen a lot of pub bands, so he thought, I can do that, and thought he'd give it a go and started learning guitar. The first album that he bought was the first Hawkwind album, so he says making weird noises on the guitar came natural after that. Very good start, I must say. My first album was called 20 Electrifying Hits, and it was sort of pop music. It wasn't too bad. Some of the stuff was a little bit edgy in 1970 when I bought the first album, but that's another story. He played in a few very small local bands. Amongst them would be You Know Who, Paris Lights and Blood Group. And he says since then he'll have a go at making a noise on anything that will make a noise. I must say I've seen a couple of videos that Sandy's done when he was playing a live gig, and I would add to that he's got quite a nice singing voice, and he's got a very natural playing style, and as you can hear from the guitar work that he's doing here, he's got a very nice way of playing the guitar. He's quite psychedelic with a lot of his music, but he's also got a very mellow sound out of the guitar there, and that's one of the things that attracted me to his playing early on. That he had a very nice guitar playing style, certainly one for someone like me to try and emulate. going a bit further into his bio, the chemical assistance came about while he was at a mate's jamming. What Sandy does these days is he's releasing a lot of tracks of his own, but he also does regular tracks with the chemical assistance. And the story about how the name the chemical assistance came about was his mate had gone to the loo and overheard some workmen outside commenting that their music sounded quite good, but would be better with some chemical assistance. So they decided, okay, that's a good name. So anything that you do see that Sandy's put out credited the chemical assistance as being recorded with his mate in his mate's living room. He started playing bass about 5 years ago, and likes to use Reason on the PC. And he says most of his stuff's jammed because he has a lousy memory. At this stage of the game, don't we all? Too much chemical assistance, Sammy. Yeah, so Sandy first came to my attention, I think, around about 3 years ago when I joined in with the Trip Me Atmospheres collective. Back then, Steve Leonard was getting a lot of us together, and so a lot of musicians have met and made friends on that site, and Sandy was one of the early friendships that I made on that site. And as I said, I was immediately attracted to his music by his marvellous guitar playing style, and we've actually had a chance to collaborate on at least one project together, which maybe later on in the year I'll play one of those tracks, but I don't want to stick too much just to my stuff. This is about everyone else rather than just me. So, but I'd like to get back to that one day anyway, because it's quite a nice track in its own right. That Sandy offered me a chance to collaborate on it, and I enjoyed doing it. I suppose the main place to find Sandy's music would be on SoundCloud. Now I'm not sure what profile is going under there. I think he's just going under Sandy Crow, but if you don't find him under Sandy Crow, look for him under the chemical assistance, and then it'll probably come up in the search pattern there. He's also on YouTube under the name of Nemesis Agogo, one word, and I'll put up those for you in a moment, and I recommend that you listen to a bit of his music. He's got some great stuff out there. I know last year he had a bit of a hiatus, had a bit of a problem with the inspiration, and concentrated on making some videos and re-releases of previous tracks. But early on this year or late last year, suddenly the inspiration hit him, and he's producing fresh music again. So hopefully we're going to get a big year out of Sandy. So keep an eye out for him. He posts regularly on the Trippy Atmospheres collective. So if you're not yet a member, I highly recommend that you join that if you want to get in contact with other like-minded musicians, and also have a look at the latest in the space rock scene from this group. I mentioned before in the previous programs, most of us Hawkwind fans who originally come from the Hawkwind fan site, and we were looking for a vehicle for posting up our own music, because we couldn't keep flooding the Hawkwind site with our own stuff, because it is, after all, primarily about Hawkwind. I think most of us do post the odd things still on the Hawkwind site, but we mainly try to keep our own stuff in other more open and general platforms, rather than something specialised to a particular group like that. But nonetheless, we're mostly Hawkwind fans, and it starts from there and branches out into other psychedelic music. So moving right along. you too can join the space rock revolution. Just send me your name, your track, a bit of a bio about yourself, and preferably a thumbnail or a video, and I'll get you on the show. Just send that to hadronconverter@gmail.com, or you can also message me on Facebook on Hadron Converter, or you can also leave a message with your links on hadronconverter.simplesite.com. I look forward to having you on the show and joining the space rock revolution. So tonight also I want to talk about some of the great spaceships of sci-fi film and literature, and this comes about from a post that someone made on the Hawkwind fan site a couple of weeks ago, asking what people thought the best sci-fi spaceship ever was. That's a tall order because usually they're generally pretty good. It's one of the marks of sci-fi that you've got to have a great spaceship. But I had to think about it, and there's a lot of great spaceships out there in the world of sci-fi, and I'd find it hard to narrow myself down to a single best favourite spaceship. But if I was going to, and this is what I ended up writing down on the post, I think my personal favourite all-time spaceship would have been the Liberator from Blake 7. So I'm going to talk about that first, and what I found great about the Liberator is that it had a really cool appearance. The three nacelles that it had branching off the main ship body, that eerie green pulsating glow that came from the engines at the rear. A lot of really great features for the time. Automatic repair systems were quite a brilliant idea. Let's face it, in the real world, you probably spend a lot of your time repairing your spaceship, so having automatic repair systems was great, no matter how dinged up it was in a battle. And I do seem to recall that in at least one episode, the ship was so badly damaged in battle that they had to abandon ship, basically because the life support systems couldn't support them. And the idea being was they just went down to a nearby planet and cruised around there and had a few adventures while they were waiting for the ship to repair itself. Other great things about the ship were, of course, the transporter system, which wasn't too common in the day. Certainly, the concept of the transporter system probably originated with Star Trek. Maybe some of you out there might know better that perhaps even Gene Roddenberry copied the idea from something else. Hard to say. I do know that Gene Roddenberry got the idea for Star Trek when he came over to Germany and saw an episode of Raumschiff Orion, and I don't recall that they used transporters in that film. So they've been pretty early concept. So having a transporter system was great. The weapons the hand weapons that they used were rather cumbersome. They came with the ship. It came fully accessorized, of course. This was the 70s, and style was very important. They were very stylistic weapons, but a little bit on the clumsy side. But one big advantage that they did have was, theoretically at least, and that seems to have been a concept that was lost in some episodes or later episodes, theoretically at least, the weapons could not be used against the owner. So if someone managed to get their hands on your ray gun, it didn't do them any good. It couldn't be used against you. having the bracelet system to be able to be used to track you for teleportation and to be able to use for communications was also good. The ship had a very stylish 70s type bridge and control room where everything was really nice, and that's one thing I could always say about the British sci-fi series is they had a sense of style. These were the same people who were driving around in E-type Jags after they were doing their producing. So the lot of shows back then, the control rooms and the means of entering and leaving the vessels were very intrinsically cool and very comfortable, and avant-garde decor in the control rooms. Now, the Liberator was also very fast, far faster than a lot of its enemies, and I think that might have been one reason why they ended up riding off the Liberator in the final series of the show, because maybe it was just getting all too easy. They could outrun or outshoot any of their potential enemies for the most part. So the death of the Liberator, I think, was a sad episode, especially the sort of the last words from Zen the computer, which was another good thing. It had a really good computer, and you've got to get your wisdom from a computer called Zen. But it felt that it let them down by being defeated itself at the end, even though it was something that no one could do anything about. The ship literally dissolved. But then subsequently, the crew had to find another ship, and that's when they I think the name of the ship was Slave One, or the computer's name was Slave One, that controlled the ship. And as far as ships go, it got them around, but it wasn't like the Liberator. The Liberator was a great ship. So that's my idea of the best ship, and we'll move along from there. Moving to number two, I better check my list. Moving to number two on my list. Now, this list is not coming in order of favourites. It's just basically as I thought of them. Another ship that I thought was quite good was the Moya, featured in the show Farscape. Now, the Moya is a rather unique concept of its time. There has been a few ships with that concept behind it, but it's was a reasonably new concept, I think. And the thing about the Moya was it was basically a living organism itself. It was alive, and it was in a at least semi-symbiotic relationship with its crew. So generally speaking, I don't think there was any episode where they had any great issues about needing power or anything like that. The ship basically didn't have too great a problem. I'm not sure about weapons systems on the ship. I don't think the ship had any weapons systems. I think they basically pretty much had to live off their wits. They were being pursued most of the time, and so it was a good ship to run on. And the crew of the ship was a rather motley crew. They were refugees and escapees from all over the place. But basically, I put Moira on the list because it's one of the few that I can think of. It's not the only, but one of the few that I can think of where they had a living organism as a ship. There has been an episode of Star Trek where they encountered a similar sort of ship, which may well have been the precursor idea for the Moya, because the ship also looked very similar. I'm just trying to remember the name of the ship. It might have been called Traveller or something like that. So moving on from there, and in this case, I cannot remember the name of the ship. Maybe some of you there might like to comment and remind me of the name from the Foundation trilogy. And I haven't read the Foundation trilogy in a long time, so I'm a little bit rusty on things. The Foundation trilogy is rather unique for any trilogy, in that I think it consisted of 5 books. A trilogy of 5 books is definitely one thing to comment on. In, I think, the last or second last of the Foundation trilogy books, they made an attempt to contact the other part of the Foundation. The Foundation divided into two factions. One specified in specialised in science and technology, and the other specialised in psychology. So they were more of a philosophical and mental skills type society. And somewhere along the track, when the Foundation was starting to re-establish itself, the technical side of the Foundation believed it was now time to go out and try and find the psychological side. And they didn't feel that using a large ship or sending a large force out would be a good idea, because they actually were a little bit concerned about the sort of power that these people might have, because they realised themselves how they'd advanced over the time, and they felt that the psychological-based society might well have strong powers of psychokinesis and who knows what, literally a magic society. And so they decided that perhaps just sending a single representative to find them would be a better policy. And so the ship that they gave him was also a semi-symbiotic ship, in that even though it was a mechanism, the way he controlled the ship was he had to place his hands on a panel, and he basically united his mind with the computer system on the ship. So he only had to think about where he wanted to go or what he wanted to control, and he was getting a feedback system from the ship. So also that was a pretty good idea, I thought, and hasn't been one that's been largely repeated, because I think also in sci-fi, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think anyone has really attempted to do any film of the Foundation trilogy, but definitely in sci-fi, ships that control themselves automatically, as the Liberator did in the initial episodes, probably aren't quite as sexy as ones where you have to move control. So later on, you saw that even though, getting back to the Liberator, even though the Liberator could find its own way, very often they piloted it just because I think you need to have something to do while you're standing around in the control room, or otherwise you might as well be lounging around in the recreation room, I suppose. The next ship that I'd have to mention in the big favourites list is another Roddenberry production, though not Gene Roddenberry. It was Majel Roddenberry, Gene Roddenberry's wife, who was the producer, and that was the Andromeda Ascendant. Now, the Andromeda Ascendant would vie very closely as my favourite ship as compared to the Liberator. It's a bit of overkill here. The ship used slipstream technology to just slip through hyperspace. That had its advantages and disadvantages. The advantage was that you could get anywhere you wanted very quickly, but perhaps the disadvantage was that it was required a rather artful pilot to actually get where you wanted, because otherwise with the slipstream you could go wrong and end off in the wrong branch on the wrong string, I suppose, and find yourself in the wrong place. But the Andromeda Ascendant was no normal ship. It was a battleship, and it was one of the most powerful battleships in the fleet at the time. And following a civil war, the Andromeda was accidentally sucked into the event horizon of a black hole, and it took the pilot, or the captain, some time to find his way out, and in the meantime civilization had collapsed and again was re-establishing itself. The Andromeda Ascendant had also some unique features, very heavily armed because it was a battleship, and it had the most powerful weapons available, the Nova bombs. So even though the captain used up most of his Nova bombs to actually get away from the black hole, he still had one up his sleeve, and one was definitely enough. And the ship was also capable of resupplying and reproducing its own weaponry, and it was never actually quite clear, I think, whether it could actually produce more Nova bombs under instruction. But I know he had one stashed away for a rainy day, and later on there seemed to be more than one there, so maybe it was able to produce more Nova bombs with time. It was also fitted out with slipstream fighters. Even though they didn't have a large crew contingent, they were capable of using the crew that they had to pilot these slipstream fighters to go out from the ship and provide a scouting and battle assistance role. The ship itself was very heavily armed with all manner of laser cannons and things, so it could certainly look after itself. It had very powerful main weaponry as well, in the mould of Gene Roddenberry, and I suppose after the current American fighters tended to have a combination of missile systems and beam weapon systems, so similar to your onboard guns and missiles that you'd have in a modern fighter jet. Probably one of the greatest things is the computer. The Andromeda Ascendant was a fully sentient being, in that the computer was artificially intelligent and also had the sexiest avatar. And the avatar was capable of assisting the captain going off on his adventures. So he was in a situation where he could be talking to the ship, but also talking to the avatar in the form of one of the crew, and also had a pretty good crew, including one of the dreaded Nietzscheans who had started the Civil War in the first place. His Nietzschean crew member was, like all Nietzscheans, very unreliable and thought mainly of himself, but generally the captain was able to keep them reasonably in line and in order, despite the differences in the crew and individual ambitions in some cases. The next ship, while we're still on the Roddenberry thing, I think would be the Defiant. The Defiant featured in the Star Trek Deep Space Nine series. What I like about the Defiant, it had the stealth features that they gained from the Romulans under an Earth Romulan treaty, and it was smaller and more compact than your normal Federation starships. So did allow them a little bit of flexibility in being able to dart off and do some missions with a smaller crew, but nevertheless quite well armed and quite a good fighter. Apart from that, it had all the normal features that you'd expect of a Federation starship. Transport, a good medical bay, phasers and missiles, and just what you need for a quick mission. And it was pretty fast too. I think it was one of the fastest starships. Could creep over the speed of a normal Enterprise Constellation class starship. Now, a similar type of ship, which was also pretty good, was the Klingon Bird of Prey. That wasn't a single ship; it was a class of ship, and there were many of them. They certainly looked the part. They were a great looking ship. I've got to say they might have done a little bit better with the environmental control systems. They always seem to be like a smoky lounge bar inside. But that's the Klingons for you. You know, they like the dingy, and that's what they got. They didn't like it too comfortable. But the bird of preys are also good. Had reasonably good weapons, a good turn of speed, and likewise the stealth technology. The biggest disadvantage with the stealth technology being that you couldn't fire while you were cloaked. Under the stealth technology, you had to uncloak and then fire, which left you vulnerable for a moment when you uncloaked. Otherwise, I suppose it wouldn't have been fair. And progressing from there, not an actual defined or named spaceship, but I think we're all familiar with the very Hawk-like spaceship in its variations. It's appeared on many of the Hawkwind albums. I don't know any details about this ship, or if anyone ever went as far as formulating some details on that ship, but they were a great looking ship too, and looked like they had loads of potential. Other ships that I'd talk about would be the shuttles in Space 1999. Now, I think they were really great. They also bore a remarkable resemblance to the later real space shuttle, and I often wonder whether they had wind of the design of the space shuttle back then and made a copy of the design, or whether the NASA engineers went, oh, that's cool, let's make one, you know. But they were a quite useful ship, and I often thought with the space shuttle that it with the actual space shuttle, space shuttles, that they didn't really reach their entire potential. It wouldn't have been bad if they could have built a space shuttle more like the Space 1999 space shuttle. Of course, technology is a restriction in these factors, but something that wasn't meant to land on Earth, but something that was meant just to shuttle between the Earth and the Moon would have been a great thing. And imagine where we'd be today if they would have done something like that, where they were launching missions up into Earth orbit to meet up with a space shuttle that would then take them to the Moon, building a permanent base on the Moon. Well, and we would have that Space 1999 scenario. Other ships worth mention as a group are those that Jerry Anderson designed. In the Thunderbirds, not all were spaceships, but they were all great flyers and great vessels with great features. Jerry Anderson did do some space-based stuff as well. At least one of the Thunderbirds, of course, was a space vehicle. He did design some space vehicles that appeared in the Thunderbirds to do space missions. There was Captain Scarlet, I think, where there was space vehicles in that. Now, one of the great features about Jerry Anderson's spaceships and his vessels goes back to what I said about that British cool that they had back then. The people who were used to driving around in Jaguar saloons and E-type Jags and rollers and so forth. So you didn't sort of climb up a ladder or lumber along in your spacesuit in your spacesuits carrying a pack like the modern astronauts have a tendency to do, and then sort of waddle your way up to the spaceship. No, you'd be sitting there, and it was time to go. So someone would open up a secret panel where there was a button. They'd push a button, and then everyone's lounge chairs would just transport them straight there. I mean, if you got to do it in comfort, that's the way to go, I think. So everyone would just be sitting there, really cool in their lounge chairs one moment, then go for a bit of a comfy ride on the sofa. Though I often thought with Thunderbird 2, you wouldn't want to slip off the sofa on the way down to Thunderbird 2. That looked like a bit of a drop. But you'd be sitting there nice and comfortable, and then dropped in your seat in the control room, and just hit go, and away you go. It was very civilized. Another ship that I'd like to talk about is the Lex. Now, the Lex is going back to this biological organism concept. Now, the Lex was basically a giant dragonfly, and it was good. It had great weapon systems because it was basically designed for his dark shadow, the ruler of the most totally evil empire in the universe. So the Lex was pretty much indestructible, and also an extremely destructive ship in itself, and certainly able to regenerate its own energy. It had some great features as well. If a little grotty, you know, it could produce food for you, but it wasn't caught on blur by any means. It sort of squeezed out a blob of material that you could sort of slop up with your hands. There was no cutlery or anything like that, and it kept you alive. But you definitely look forward to shore leave to get a decent feed. The toilets are actually self-wiping, so and the showers were also quite interesting. So the Lex had some interesting features as well as having these small dragonflies that it used to use as a shuttle ship. It had no transporter system as a beam system, but you could take these little transporter shuttles, which were rather delicate and often tended to get wrecked, but there was a continuous assembly line of them being created under the whole sort of insectoidal way that Lex went about things. So there was just an endless chain of these things in various states of growth, ready to go and send out, and they used them quite regularly. And it wouldn't be complete without mentioning the Starship Enterprise, both the Enterprise 1 and the Enterprise 2 also. The Enterprise came in quite a few models, but I think the main ones we think about are the original Enterprise, which pretty well coined the design, and not as fast as the later ones, a little bit faster than the earlier one with the retro Enterprise series, but quite a good spaceship, quite fast, quite modern, and certainly when we were watching that in the late 60s, Star Trek seemed to be a very modern show. Lots of the concepts are very modern, and it's funny actually today, if you look at the original Enterprise series, how many of the things that they had on the Enterprise, which not only do we perhaps have, but maybe have had and outgrown because we've come up with things that are better in some cases. We still haven't come up with a good warp drive yet, or a transporter system, or a good phaser system. But a lot of the other stuff that they had in that, we've come up with. The second Enterprise was a bit more modern with the computer displays, less less in the way of flashing lights, and more of the modern graphics type displays, but we're used to using today on a computer. So that was also quite modern in its time, but naturally getting a bit dated now. I'm not quite sure when the first of the Star Trek Next Generation series came out, but I think it was the late 80s. So certainly it was probably around about the late 80s, because I remember I did used to watch it sometimes coming home from a shift, and I was working shift in those days, and that was the late 80s. And I did have a couple of others there, and oh yes, the Destiny. If you're on a budget, the Destiny from the Stargate spin-off series. Not the best, it's falling apart. It's probably more akin to most of the cars that I've driven most of my life. You're one step away from a total breakdown and failure all the way with that, but it just sort of kept going. Had some interesting alien technology and all that sort of thing, but dreadfully unreliable and falling apart the whole time through the series. It's a shame they didn't actually go a bit further with that series, but the way the ship was falling apart, they would have had to do something dramatic to keep the series going. You needed to fix that ship, that's for sure. And the last one on my list, very fast, very simple. That would be the Borg cubes. They're very fast. They are capable of interdimensional travel, but I wouldn't recommend that you travel on one, because the when you do sign on a Borg ship, it is a little bit difficult to get away. You probably end up joining the collective, and that's not necessarily a good thing for a few individuals out there. So that's my quick wrap up of spaceships. There might be some that, or there's boundless some. There's been many over sci-fi movies in time that are also probably worth a mention. But if you've got any comments about what you think was a great ship that I didn't mention, or if I've left something out that you think, well, why didn't you talk about that? Put it down to the time factor. That I'll try and do a reprise on those things if there's enough interest in it. I hope you enjoyed our little showroom guide for space vehicles. So well, that wraps it up for this show, and I hope you enjoyed it. And if you did, please click on the subscribe and like, and make any comments that you care to make. And I'm always looking for feedback or any advice regards anything, any future topics that I should cover, or if you think that I could have covered something better and I left something out, well, I'll always do a reprise if that's the case, so I can stand corrected. And also, please subscribe to my Patreon if you can. It helps me to make more and better videos. That's it's a work in progress, and hope to improve things over time as I get more experience with using the equipment I've got. And and also perhaps getting a few other bits and pieces that can improve things. I'll play us out with this piece by Axiom of Sound. I had Axiom of Sound on the live stream show, but of course with the difficulties with the sound, his track didn't come out very well. So I'll put it in again, so just to be fair, that he can be clearly heard. I do have his track posted up on the playlist already that you can listen to. But then any of you that didn't hear it, you can catch that one. So remembering at the start of the show, we've got Sandy Crow. Look for him on SoundCloud. You can also find Axiom of Sound on SoundCloud, and also with Sandy, he's done quite a few videos. Now I've got to double check to find the details for Vinny's site. He has got a few videos up there that you perhaps check out if you like, and we'll be back next week with another band and some more exciting topics. Hope you enjoy it.